What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one we'll break down what's going on with SPY, Tesla, the QQQ, Nvidia, and many tickers out there. I'm going to talk about how the market's looking, why it's looking relatively weak right now, what you should be watching for moving forward. And I'm also going to talk about AMC just very briefly and what's happening with the markets. But before I do anything like that, before I talk about all the news that's coming out and all of this stuff may affect the markets, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Webull link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign for Webull, the link down below, and deposit any amount of money into the account, you are guaranteed up to 12 free stocks. The offer ends in just about 9 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, so let's talk about the market, what's going on with it. Just to be honest with you all, most of the stocks out there are still looking relatively weak, especially looking at the performance from Friday. And what's going to determine how the market moves will be two big factors for the week. Number one, the big earnings coming out, especially Microsoft. That's going to be a big one I'm watching. And then also we have the FOMC meeting on Wednesday when Jerome Powell is going to be speaking. So it could be quite unpredictable what happens when the guy speaks. So just be very careful on days like that. However, approaching these big events and going into this week, looking at what happened on Thursday and Friday, the market is still looking relatively weak, and we do have some potentially bearish looking setups. However, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to break down exactly why that is, and not to mention the fact that there are still some big opportunities for the week. So to be honest with everyone, I know SPY and like Tesla are big stocks people trade all the time. You could trade these; they'll definitely be fun. But I'm going to be watching in closer detail AMC stock because, like I said before, we got a really nice pop, good volume. There's a high cost to borrow with very, very limited shares available to borrow. And I'm going to be watching if this thing could get a very, very nice pop because we are getting some updates from the courts already, but that could be fun to play. Then also another big play is going to be Microsoft. Microsoft is going to be a good one too because I believe, and this is my opinion, I think earnings is going to be pretty good for them. I say this because of the AI developments and the fact that they're going to be talking about charging for new AI services. This could be very, very big for their revenue and help them generate billions upon billions of dollars. So I'm going to be watching this. I think there's a chance Microsoft's going to hold up nicely, maybe try to pop a little bit, and then going into like its reaction after earnings. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm really in the middle, but I am leaning a little bit more bullish. I think it might surprise a lot of people, and this could help the market temporarily. But we'll have to wait and see what happens on Tuesday. But anyways, let's talk about the market, what's going on with all these different stocks. So just to remind you all, here are the earnings to look out for tomorrow. Tomorrow we have Domino's Pizza, we have Philips, we have a couple of banks out there coming out, such as the Bank of Hawaii and beyond. Then after the market closes, we have a couple of other tech stocks, some very small ones after that, but nothing too serious coming out for Monday. Tuesday is when things get real because we have GM, Verizon, 3M, GE, Spotify, and the list goes on for the morning. And then after that, when the market closes, we have Microsoft, Alphabet, Snap, Visa, and just a couple of others. Microsoft and Google are going to be the two big ones. Make sure you're watching these for Tuesday after the market closes. For Wednesday, we have Boeing, Coca-Cola, Hilton, AT&T, and just a few others. Not to mention, after the market closes, we have Meta, Chipotle, and beyond. And then before the market opens for Thursday, we have McDonald's and a few others. Then after that, we have like Intel and Roku, and the list goes on for Friday. But basically, it's going to be a big, big, big earnings week, especially on Tuesday through Thursday. We have huge earnings coming out from Intel to Meta and Microsoft. Make sure you are ready for this. And in my opinion, I'm not too optimistic about most of these earnings on like the big tech side from like Meta and Google and Verizon when you have communications and Intel. But I am more optimistic for like Microsoft in particular. I'm not saying they're going to do bad. By the way, I'm just saying that like I'm not too sure about them, but I'm more confident on Microsoft. I think they have a lot of potential. Looking at the new announcements that came out. But anyways, looking back at some important data, I want to remind you all that for tomorrow, there's not really anything coming out except for PMI. So the PMI is a very good gauge about how the market is doing. And we're going to find out some more information about how manufacturing and global services are doing for the S&P. This is important because this data will help the Fed and many other individuals out there understand the contraction of the economy or the expansion. And this will be very important to distinguish how certain sectors are doing. So 15 minutes after the market opens at 9:45 a.m. if you're on the East Coast or New York time, expect more volatility. And besides that, there isn't really much else data coming out. So now let's talk about the market. How are the charts looking? Well, One thing worth noting is SPY is getting relatively close to this low right over here on this 451.45 level. So I'm going to be anticipating maybe a bounce during the pre-market, another gap up when we open up. But then I think the market may continue to slow down because when you zoom out of the charts, this is looking like a potential head and shoulders, or even like a cup and handle, an inverse cup and handle that's forming that could lead to more downside. We also have this imbalance down here around this 450 area, which to me is going to act as a magnet for SPY. So I'm going to be watching for a small bounce in the morning, then some more potential downside. Over the next few days, I'm going to be watching 450 as a target for SPY. For AMC, what do I think is going to happen? I know a lot of people are asking. I think we're going to be waiting on the lawsuit now because right now the courts have just continued. They're continuing to fight basically, and they're revising the settlement now. However, we haven't really heard much from Zern just yet. So we're going to be waiting what Zern says if they break anything down. There is a good chance, though, if things remain as they are right now, we could see AMC try to pop in the morning. And we're going to be watching if it could break 8.76. If it breaks it, I'm going to be watching 10, then $12. And like I said before, it could be a very fun play to play. But always remember, every time this thing ran for the past 2 years, unfortunately, I know you don't want to hear this, but it's the truth, it pumped and dumped every single time. Okay. From January 2021, March, and June 2021, September, it pumped and dumped. Going into 2022, March and August, it pumped and dumped, pumped and dumped. Very recently, the last few months, it pumped and dumped. So this may be very similar, unfortunately. I just want you guys to know that. Be very careful and don't forget to secure those profits. For Tesla, this thing is looking relatively weak as well. Very strong downtrend on the daily chart. On the 4 hour time frame, it's the same thing. This is looking quite bearish still, not really a strong sign of a bounce just yet. And on the 30-minute time frame, it tried to get this nice bounce, but ended up failing as time went on, slowing down. So I'm going to be anticipating a retest of this resistance very close to this 262.5 to 265 area. I think it's going to try to gap up and push up just a tiny bit, then slow down as the day goes on, kind of range trade for a bit. And we're going to be watching 255. Tesla could hold this. If it fails to hold this, we're going to be watching this thing come all the way down to about the 200 EMA is the next major support at 251. My guts tells me it's going to gap up then dump as time goes on and potentially retest 255, if not 251. Looking at Neo, this thing is it's the same thing. It's going to try to pop up very close to like 10.7 to 11 and end up slowing down as time goes on. Also has this unfilled gap around 10.36, which I think it's going to fill. For Aapl, it's looking very weak right now, unfortunately. On the 4 hour time frame, on the 30-minute time frame, it's the same. If we bring up these levels on Aapl, it actually broke below its important support. The support it was supposed to hold was around 192.5. Because it broke it, that is actually a bearish signal. Apple's also looking relatively weak. It is trying to curl on the MACD, so I'm going to be watching for very similar to SPY, a gap up in the 192s, lots of sideways price action. Then I'm going to be anticipating a retest of 191.32 and potentially more downside very soon, maybe it getting very close to like 190. The triple Q is also looking quite weak. Just like SPY, we have a potential inverse cup and handle information. This is also kind of looking like a slanted head and shoulders. And we have this unfilled gap at 373. I believe it's going to come all the way down to 373. It's going to gap up in the morning, possibly to about 377 or so, maybe a little bit lower, because we're going to be watching this 50 EMA as its resistance on the 30 minutes time frame. This is on a downtrend, right? So this is going to go lower and lower, maybe closer to like the 376s. It's going to gap up somewhere around there, 376 to 377, somewhere around there. Retest this and maybe reject and continue lower for 373, in my opinion. For Nvidia, I think Nvidia is still looking relatively weak. It is still on a downtrend, and we're going to be watching some of these very important levels. I am actually noting this like 440 area, which was acting as previous resistance, which is now going to become support. 440 is going to be a level to watch for. It's going to likely try to bounce in the morning in the pre-market, then continue its way a little bit lower. It could drop a little bit lower to about 444. If that fails, this 435 is possible, but I honestly don't really mind it. I just see this as a very good buying opportunity, and I think Nvidia is going to get a very monstrous bounce in the future. However, just so you guys know, there are all these earnings coming out which are affecting the overall sentiments of the markets. So that is leading to this domino effect, which is affecting so many other stocks. This is affecting like the Neos out there, right? The Xbox out there, the Nvidias out there, the Metas. They're all getting impacted by all these big earnings. So it's not really because of Nvidia itself that is dropping like this. And I do believe this thing is going to go flying up approaching earnings. I'm still keeping that on my radar. As for Microsoft, I think it actually came down to filling some balance. It came very close to support right here. We're going to be watching 340 to 342.5. I think it's going to try to hold around there and start uptrending a bit. And I think approaching earnings, you might see this thing try to make its way up closer to like 350 or so. And then after earnings, we're going to get a very, very big reaction on Tuesday after the market closes. My gut tells me, okay, it's going to be a positive reaction, but I could be wrong. So don't just like gamble or make decisions based off what I say, since I'm not giving financial advice. But I just want to let you guys know that I'm optimistic and I'm anticipating some good price action from it. So this is going to be one of the stocks I watch for the week. It looks very, very interesting, getting good volume, and I think it's going to make some nice moves. For AMD, looking at AMD, we're going to be watching how this thing reacts. It's still looking relatively weak. We have a support right now around this 109 area, 107 and 105, with resistance around 111 and 114. We also have this very, very important looking. I think we have an imbalance right over here around this like 115 area. So I'm going to be watching for a potential gap up and a retest of about 115. I think it's possible it's going to try to make its way up there. Slow down as the day goes on, just trade sideways after that. But I'm going to be watching for a retest of 115. But if this thing were to break down, we did have this very important level at 109 that could be retested too if it continues to remain bearish because of the market. But I don't think so. I think this thing is going to try to bounce and try to make its way up higher. And I also think that Nvidia is going to try to bounce just like it, but then these things will slow down a little bit later. I forgot to mention this for Nvidia. I could see this thing bounce in the morning, of course, get very close to the 450s and then slow down a little bit. And I think AMD is going to follow the same trend. So watch for a potential gap up and a slowdown as time goes on, just like the trend we've been seeing recently. The dollar index has this imbalance up here, all the way up around this 101.6 level. I believe it was somewhere around there. So right about here, it's getting very close to this imbalance to fill it. That's a bearish signal for the markets. The dollar is gaining strength. Just be well aware of that. For Coinbase, it came all the way down to our target of 100. We're going to be watching if 100 holds. It's still looking bearish. So I'm going to be looking for a small bounce, a retest of like 104. Not 104, I'm sorry, 102.5, and then a rejection. And I think it's going to eventually make its way down to 97.5, if not lower. And I do believe there's some downside coming. So I just wanted to inform you guys about that. For Google, this is also looking relatively weak. It has earnings coming out, so expect a very big move. But I want to let you guys know that this thing was forming kind of like a head and shoulders. Also, it could be forming like a cup and handle that's inverted, just like how we have this like cup, the base right here, a small bounce afterwards. If it continues to break down, you're going to be watching this 118 test. If that fails us, it's going to come all the way down to about 116. If it tries to bounce off 118, you're going to be watching 120.5 and then 122. What do I think is going to happen? I'm going to be looking for a bounce, a retest of about 121.5, then a rejection off that, and a slowdown and a retest of 118 later on. For Amazon, I'm seeing the same thing basically. I think Amazon is also looking relatively weak. It came down to my target of 128 on Friday. I'm going to be watching for a retest, however, of 131 around there, then another rejection and a slowdown, and eventually another retest of 128 later on as well. So a nice pop and drop on Amazon is what I'm anticipating. Same thing for Meta. I think Meta is looking relatively weak, but we do tend to see buyers try to step in, especially as we approach earnings for it. So I'm going to be watching if this thing could get a nice bounce. It typically tries to bounce approaching earnings. So I think there's a good chance we're going to see this thing retest 304 at the very least. And I might keep this on my radar too. I'm more optimistic about like Microsoft though, but we might see this thing uptrend approaching its earnings. So watch for 304 and a potential retest of the 310 area. I'm going to be watching for a bounce on Meta as it approaches earnings. So until then, please remain calm, cool, and collected. And that's basically what I have for this video. Most stocks are looking quite bearish from a technical standpoint, but there are a couple of exceptions out there, such as AMC, Meta, and Microsoft, that either have earnings or some big news coming out. And we may see other pieces of news affecting the markets, but just be well aware of all these different nuances. And also remember to watch for confirmations of support and resistance. All right, so I went over my targets on most of these stocks, which are looking quite bearish in my opinion still. And don't forget that I have this big data that I want to report 15 minutes after the market opens tomorrow at 9:45 a.m. PMI is coming out. Expect some volatility because of it. The market has been pumping and then slowing down for the last couple of trading days. This happened on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And there's a good chance it's going to happen again for Monday. All right, for the majority of stocks out there, with a couple of exceptions being Meta, Microsoft, AMC, maybe a couple of others as well. All right, so watch earnings, remain calm, cool, and collected. Do what you have to do, or watch support and resistance. I'll see you guys in the next one. The market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright despite these short term nuances. And peace out.